On a winter morning, when the world felt colder than it should, a blind boy reached out to touch a wounded war dog no one else dared to approach. No one expected what followed, because in that quiet moment, when darkness met darkness, something unexplainable happened. Something that felt less like coincidence and more like the gentle work of God. This is the story of Torin, a broken K-9 soldier trapped in memories of fire, a child who lived his whole life in shadow, and a father who had forgotten how to hope, until the day all three lives collided. What happened next will make you believe that healing is real, that second chances are divine, and that sometimes God brings the right souls together at the exact moment they need each other most. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to our channel so more people can receive these miracles of hope. A thin winter fog clung to Northwood Ridge like a quiet warning. Ethan Cole guided his son Liam along the gravel path leading toward the K-9 training compound, a place that smelled of old timber, cold steel, and the ghosts of barking dogs long retired. Ethan, at 42, carried himself with the rigid economy of movement that came from a life of discipline. Straight back, squared shoulders, steps chosen instead of taken. His face bore the rough edges of a man carved by war. A strong jaw shadowed with coarse dark stubble, deep-set gray eyes that rarely blinked, and a faint scar trailing from his left temple to his cheekbone, a reminder of the IED that ended his SEAL career. There was a heaviness in the way he breathed, as though his lungs had forgotten what it meant to fill fully. Beside him walked 12-year-old Liam, a slender boy with soft auburn hair and skin pale like paper held too long beneath a lamp. His eyes, clouded with the milky sheen of blindness, remained half-lifted, never quite settling on a point. Yet his head tilted slightly as he walked, sensing the air, the vibrations, the shift of Ethan's weight through the leash of trust that bound the two of them. Liam's cane, a lightweight charcoal gray one, tapped rhythmically on the path. He carried a quiet curiosity, the kind that made strangers lower their voices when they passed him in town. Gentle, wistful, and full of a courage he never claimed for himself. His therapist often said, "Let him touch the world with his hands, Ethan. Let his fingers see what his eyes cannot." So today, Ethan brought him here, not for adoption, not for training, but so Liam could feel the warmth, the textures, the life of something bigger than himself. The compound's entrance creaked open as Alexei Morozov, the chief trainer, stepped out to greet them. Alexei was a tall, narrow-shouldered man with a posture that made him appear both fragile and unshakable at once. His sandy blonde hair was pulled back loosely into a short tie, and his high cheekbones gave him a gaunt, almost wolfish appearance. Deep lines at the edges of his pale blue eyes suggested decades spent squinting against sun, wind, and heartbreak. Originally from a small village outside Novosibirsk, he had once served in a military K-9 division before immigrating to the U.S., a history that left him with a reserved demeanor and a habit of standing slightly sideways to people, as though bracing for bad news. "Ethan," Alexei greeted with his thick Russian accent, "good to see you again. And this must be Liam." Liam smiled politely. "Good morning, sir." "He hears everything," Ethan murmured with a hint of pride. "The world talks," Alexei replied softly. "Most people just don't listen." He led them into the facility, a long corridor of metal kennels, muted barking, and the dry, sterile smell of disinfectant. As they moved deeper inside, Liam reached out to graze the air, letting his fingers brush along the cold bars of the kennels. Dogs barked, whimpered, or paced with frenzied circles, but Liam's expression remained gentle, almost hopeful. Ethan watched him closely, protectively, fearfully. He knew how vicious some of the dogs here could be, how easily a single slip could turn curiosity into bloodshed. A memory flashed, quick, sharp, unwanted, of a dusty Afghan road and the guttural scream of a wounded dog that had once saved his team. He pushed the thought away. "Let him feel them," Alexei said softly. "We skipped the last one." Ethan didn't ask why. He had learned long ago that when Alexi's jaw tightened like that, silence was the wiser path, but they reached the end of the row anyway. Liam's hand drifted toward the final kennel, the only one with a heavy warning chain across its door, the only one shrouded in shadow even though overhead lights flickered above it. Before Ethan could redirect him, a violent growl tore through the corridor. The sound was raw, serrated, like metal dragged across bone. Liam froze. Ethan's instincts ignited. He stepped forward with his arm already positioned to pull Liam away. But the boy simply tilted his head and whispered, "There's someone sad in there, Dad." Inside the dim kennel stood Torin, a massive, gray German shepherd, larger than any dog Liam had encountered. Torin's fur was coarse, dusted with charcoal and silver, the kind that would have shimmered beautifully if not for the jagged scars streaking across his flanks and muzzle. One ear was torn at the tip, the other twitched constantly, as though haunted by sounds no one else could hear. His eyes, deep amber, almost gold, burned with a weary intensity, the kind found in soldiers too long at war. His body hunched defensively, weight shifted back, every muscle trembling on the edge of explosion. He looked less like a dog and more like a broken weapon, once mighty, now barely held together. Alexei raised a warning hand. "Do not go closer. Torin, he is different." Ethan nodded. "I've heard the rumors." "Rumors are gentle compared to truth." Alexei exhaled slowly, voice cracking with something that sounded almost like pity. "His handler died in an explosion in Kandahar. Torin survived, but inside, he burns. 14 months now. No touch, no approach. He destroys anyone who tries." The dog growled again, a harsh, jagged roar that sounded like it came from a place far deeper than the throat. But then Liam whispered, "Torin?" The sound of his voice was soft, fragile, almost a question. Torin's growl halted mid-vibration. His ear lifted slightly. His trembling eased. The corridor fell utterly silent. Ethan felt his own heartbeat stall. Alexei breathed, "Impossible." Liam took a step closer. Ethan's pulse kicked sharply, but he didn't stop him. Some instinct, old, primal, told him the boy was safe. Torin lowered his head, slowly, cautiously. The great shepherd took a step forward, claws clicking faintly against the concrete. His amber eyes softened, losing their knife-edge hardness. Liam extended his hand, fingers trembling not with fear, but wonder. "Hello," he whispered, touching Torin's muzzle. The dog didn't growl, didn't flinch. Instead, he released a single, quivering breath, one that sounded heartbreakingly familiar to Ethan. It was the same breath he had once heard from a teammate dying in his arms, the sound of a soul fighting not to shatter. Alexei stared, disbelieving. He has not allowed anyone within arm's reach since the explosion." Ethan swallowed hard, throat tight. He could feel something shifting inside his chest, something old and painful stirring awake. Torin pressed his scarred face into Liam's palm, closing his eyes as though savoring the very first moment of safety he'd felt in over a year. Liam smiled softly. "He's warm," he murmured, "and sad." Ethan blinked, forcing down a sudden rush of emotion. He had seen hardened men crumble under the weight of grief. He had felt it himself. And now, in a quiet corridor lit by flickering bulbs, he watched a wounded dog lean into the hands of a blind boy, two souls navigating darkness in different ways. He recognized that breath, that trembling, that surrender. It belonged to the broken. And in that moment, Ethan realized Torin's pain was not unfamiliar. It mirrored something he carried, something he had hidden behind silence and muscle and discipline. Maybe that was why the sight struck so deep. Maybe that was why it hurt. Torin let out a final soft whine, a sound so fragile it felt sacred. And Ethan understood. The dog wasn't just calming down. He was coming home, to a place he had never known but somehow recognized the moment Liam touched him. A faint morning snow dusted the rooftops of Northwood Ridge as Ethan turned his truck onto the long road leading back to the K-9 training compound. The winter light was a pale silver, the kind that seemed neither warm nor cold, suspended as if afraid to commit. Liam sat beside him, small hands folded neatly on his lap, posture straight but anxious. His auburn hair, messy from sleep, brushed softly against the collar of his navy jacket. There was a quiet determination etched across his young face, an expression Ethan recognized well, the look of someone who heard something calling them, even if they could not see where it came from. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, jaw clenched with an old soldier's habit of anticipating danger. In the week since their visit, Torrin's trembling breath and unexpected surrender to Liam's touch replayed in his mind more often than he cared to admit. It was irrational, almost impossible, yet undeniable, and irrational things made Ethan nervous. When they pulled into the parking lot, Alexei Morozov was already waiting outside the building, his narrow frame wrapped in a patched forest green coat that had survived more winters than most men could bear. The morning wind teased strands of his sandy blonde hair free from the tie at his neck. His pale blue eyes carried an uneasy flicker, though he hid it behind the stoic expression of someone who had learned to greet life with wary respect. "You came back," he said simply. Ethan nodded. He kept asking. Liam smiled shyly. "Torrin heard me before. Maybe he remembers." Alexei hesitated, rubbing the ridge of an old burn scar along his wrist, a remnant from his military K-9 days. "Remembering is not always good for dogs like him," he murmured, but stepped aside to let them enter. Inside, the air felt different. Thicker, charged with some restless anticipation. The dogs barked and whined as they passed, but Liam seemed focused, angling his head as though he could hear Torrin's breath from across the building. "He's here," Liam whispered. Ethan didn't know how the boy sensed it, but his certainty was enough to quicken Ethan's pulse. Alexei led them past the first row of kennels, muttering half instructions, half prayers under his breath. "We will not enter the cage. We stand behind the line. If I say move, you move." But all those precautions crumbled as soon as Torrin saw them. The massive shepherd, once a storm of scars, fury, and trembling muscle, rose from his corner like a creature waking from a long nightmare. His amber eyes locked onto Liam first. Then, in a movement so fluid, so unexpected that even Alexei gasped, Torrin pressed his face against the bars with a soft, broken whine. Liam's expression brightened instantly. "Hi, Torrin," he breathed. Torrin's tail, stiff from trauma and disuse, gave one uncertain wag. Just one. But it was more than anyone had seen in 14 months. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Something was happening here. Something no training manual had ever prepared them for. "Ethan," Alexei whispered, "I do not like this. He is too calm." "Maybe calm is good," Ethan replied. "Maybe for once calm is exactly what he needs." Alexei did not look convinced. They were only a few steps from the kennel when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the entire compound dropped into darkness. A violent metallic clang echoed behind them as a stainless steel feeding tray toppled from a storage shelf, hitting the floor with a sharp, brutal crash. The sound sliced through the dark like a bullet. Torrin's reaction was instantaneous and catastrophic. The shepherd lunged backward, slamming into the concrete wall of his cage. His muscles convulsed. His breath came in hoarse, frantic bursts. The whites of his eyes flashed. Then the growling began, deeper than any sound from before, an ancient roar of fear and memory. "Back!" Alexei shouted, gripping Ethan's arm with surprising strength. "Now! Move them back!" But before Ethan could step in front of his son, Liam slipped past him, guided by instinct rather than sight. The boy moved slowly, hands reaching through the darkness as if he could feel the air vibrating around Torrin's terror. Ethan's heart crashed painfully in his chest. For a heartbeat, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. could only relive the same helplessness he'd felt the day the explosion stole the lives of his men. The same sound, the same panic, the same choking fear. Liam reached the cage. Torrin thrashed against the door, claws scraping metal, body jerking as though he were trapped again beneath that Afghan blast. His head snapped toward the sound of Liam's approaching footsteps. Ethan felt the world narrow into a pinpoint of fear. One wrong move, one wrong breath, and the boy would be gone. But Liam's voice slipped into the chaos like a warm ribbon. "It's okay, Torrin. I'm here." Torrin froze mid-lunge. The darkness seemed to hold its breath. Liam pressed his palm gently against the cold bars, then leaned closer, resting his forehead near the trembling muzzle behind them. "Darkness isn't scary," he whispered. "I live in it every day. It doesn't hurt." Torrin's growl broke into a fragile whine. His rigid frame sagged against the metal. His breathing slowed from frantic gasps to shuddering exhales, each one softer than the last. The compound still sat in total darkness, but in that small space between boy and dog, something illuminated, a fragile thread of understanding woven from wounds neither could see. Torrin lowered himself to the floor. Then, with agonizing slowness, he pressed his head against Liam's hand. The trembling didn't stop entirely, but it eased enough for Liam to stroke the scarred fur through the bars. Ethan let out the breath he'd been holding, gripping a support beam to steady himself. His legs felt hollow. Beside him, Alexei silently crossed himself, a gesture Ethan had never seen him make before. "Ethan," he whispered hoarsely, "this boy, he reaches places no adult can." The lights flickered back on abruptly. Torrin blinked, startled but calm. Liam remained beside him, fingers tracing the jagged line of a scar. And for the first time since his handler's death, Torrin looked at peace. Alexei exhaled shakily. "I cannot deny it. Liam is the only one who can reach him." Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "He's just talking to him." "Talking?" Alexei shook his head slowly. "No. They share something, a darkness that does not frighten them." His pale blue eyes softened. "He needs the boy. And perhaps the boy needs him, too." Ethan didn't respond, but deep inside, he knew the trainer was right. The world had taken so much from both Liam and Torrin: sight, safety, certainty, and left them navigating endless nights. Perhaps that shared night was why they recognized each other. Ethan cleared his throat. "Alexei, I want to take him home." The trainer's brows knit sharply. "No, not safe, not now." "You saw what happened," Ethan argued. "He came back because of Liam." Alexei hesitated, torn between experience and the raw truth before his eyes. He paced once, hands clasped tightly behind his back, jaw shifting as he weighed risks shaped by years of watching wounded animals break further under pressure. Finally, he sighed, a long, defeated breath. "I will agree, but only temporarily." Ethan felt a flicker of relief. "How long?" 30 days, Alexei said firmly. "Then Torrin returns if there's no improvement." He fixed Ethan with a piercing stare. "And if something happens, anything, you bring him back immediately." Ethan nodded. Liam turned his head toward them, confusion flitting across his features. "Can Torrin come home with us?" Ethan's voice softened. "For now, buddy, for a little while." Liam's smile, a gentle, hopeful thing, made something inside Ethan loosen, as though a locked door had opened just a crack. Torrin gave a quiet, hesitant whine, as if echoing that fragile hope. And so the decision was made, not with certainty nor safety, but with the trembling faith of 3 souls who had learned to survive the dark in their own ways. Torrin would go home with them for 30 days, a trial, a risk, a chance. A mellow afternoon sun stretched across the quiet neighborhood as Ethan guided the truck toward their home, the wheels crunching over thin frost melting into the earth. The sky glowed pale orange, and an early winter breeze fluttered the tall pine trees that lined the street. It was Torrin's first full day in the Cole household, a trial period of 30 days, though everyone silently knew that 30 days would decide far more than where a wounded dog would sleep. Torrin sat in the truck bed behind them, his vast gray body tense but watchful. The German shepherd's scarred silhouette was stark against the fading light, the jagged lines on his muzzle catching glints of gold from the sun. His ears, one torn and one upright, lifted and lowered in small, cautious reflexes at every unfamiliar sound. Ethan had left the window half open so Liam could talk to Torrin during the drive. "You okay back there?" Liam asked gently. Torrin gave a soft grunt that seemed almost like an answer. Liam smiled, leaning back in his seat, his unfocused eyes reflecting a peace Ethan rarely saw in him. That alone, Ethan thought, was worth every risk. When they arrived home, a small house of warm cedar and aging stone nestled beneath a canopy of spruce branches, Torrin followed Liam closely, as though the boy were a point of gravity. He moved with careful steps, not timid but calculated, testing the floorboards, scanning corners, sniffing the hallways as though mapping a battlefield. The house's interior smelled of old books, pine-scented cleaner, and the faint metallic trace of the heater warming for winter. Liam's room sat at the end of a short hallway, marked by glow-in-the-dark stickers Ethan had placed long ago, shapes Liam could not see but liked to trace with his fingers. As they entered, Torrin sniffed the room intently before lying down beside Liam's bed. When Ethan placed a bowl of water nearby, Torrin's golden eyes flicked up with an expression that felt far older than the dog himself. That night, the first test of Torrin's adjustment came sooner than expected. A loud slam echoed through the house as the wind banged the back door open. Torrin shot to his feet instantly, body stiffening like a drawn bow. His breathing sharpened. His tail went rigid. Ethan saw the moment Torrin's mind flashed back to explosions and chaos. Just as the shepherd's muscles bunched in panic, ready to bolt or attack, small hands reached forward. Liam, awakened by the noise, had stepped from his room, his expression calm despite the sudden disturbance. "It's okay," Liam whispered, finding Torrin's shoulder with practiced ease. "It's just the wind." The sentence rolled gently from the boy's mouth, and as he stroked the coarse fur along Torrin's spine, the dog's trembling subsided. The transformation was startling, like watching a storm dissolve into still water. Ethan exhaled slowly. "He listens to you," he murmured. Liam smiled faintly. "He knows I get scared too." Ethan wondered at that truth, how fear recognized fear, and perhaps how broken recognized broken. Within days, Torrin began guiding Liam as though the instinct had always been there. Their first real walk outside the house wasn't meant to be training, only a short stroll to stretch Torrin's legs. But the dog quickly revealed his extraordinary intuition. When Liam stepped toward the street's uneven curb, Torrin swung his body sideways, blocking the boy's path just enough for Liam's cane to tap the shepherd's fur. "There's a drop?" Liam asked. Torrin let out a single huff. Ethan blinked, stunned. He's signaling," he whispered. The next day, Torrin halted abruptly near a shallow ditch, nudging Liam back with a gentle push of his head. Then again, near a rough pile of gravel left from a construction project. Each time, Torrin acted not in fear, but in focused concentration, a soldier analyzing terrain for the safety of someone he protected. One crisp morning, a new test appeared unbidden. Liam was in the backyard, walking the length of the wooden fence, tracing the texture of cedar with his fingers. The yard stretched behind the house in a long, sloping patch of grass bordered by twilight-colored wildflowers. Torrin trailed close behind, nose low to the ground. That was when a small rattlesnake emerged from beneath a rotting patch of fence. It wasn't large, barely 2 feet long, its scales dull brown, its eyes unremarkable, but its presence meant danger. Torrin's reaction was instantaneous. His shoulders rose, fur bristling, and he lunged between Liam and the snake with a sharp, thunderous bark. The sound tore through the quiet yard. Liam gasped and stumbled backward. Torrin advanced, snarling, a fierce, protective sound that came from somewhere deep inside him. The rattlesnake recoiled, then slithered quickly back through the fence hole. Only when it was gone did Torrin's body sag with tension leaving him. Liam crouched, hands searching until they found Torrin's neck. "You protected me," he whispered, breath trembling not from fear but gratitude. Torrin licked the boy's wrist once, a slow, deliberate gesture. Ethan had been halfway out the back door when it happened, frozen by the sight. For a moment he could only watch. His son had never been so safe, and it wasn't because of him. It was because of Torrin. The realization was both humbling and deeply, achingly beautiful. But not all threats wore scales. Some wore cruelty shaped in the mouths of careless children. One late afternoon, while Liam traced the fence line again, humming softly as he walked, 3 neighborhood boys, roughly 13 or 14, passed along the sidewalk. They were the kind who traveled in packs, all elbows and loud voices, their confidence built on numbers rather than kindness. Their leader, a lanky boy with a mop of unruly black hair named Darren Pike, was known for pushing boundaries. His sharp nose and narrow brown eyes gave him a perpetual look of mischief sharpened into meanness. Darren's friend Mike was shorter and stocky, cheeks round and red from the cold, while the third boy, Tyler, carried a nervous energy that made him mimic the others more than think for himself. Darren noticed Liam first. "Hey, blind boy," he called mockingly. "Try not to walk into the fence." His friends snickered. Liam froze. His hands tightened on his cane. Ethan wasn't close enough yet. Torrin was. The shepherd moved with a sudden deliberate step, planting himself between Liam and the boys. His body grew tall and rigid, fur rising along his spine like a dark ridge. His growl, low, deep, rumbling, was the sound of a battlefield warning. Darren's swagger evaporated. His eyes widened. Whoa, dude, call your dog off," he stammered, stepping back so quickly he tripped over Mike's foot. The 3 boys stumbled away in a pitiful scramble of limbs and panic. Liam reached down, hand brushing Torrin's head. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "They're gone." Torrin eased, though his amber eyes remained fixed on the retreating boys until they vanished from sight. Ethan finally reached them, chest tight. "He protected you," he murmured. Liam nodded. "He always does." Ethan swallowed hard. Somehow the truth of it shook him, not out of fear but out of awe. The bond between boy and dog was becoming something extraordinary, something unspoken yet stronger by the day. Over the next week, Ethan watched them closely. Every interaction, every instinct Torrin showed, wove Liam more deeply into the shepherd's wounded heart. Torrin followed him from room to room, slept by his door, and lay beside him in the yard as Liam listened to the wind. The dog's PTSD still surfaced, at sudden noises, sharp metallic clinks, the shifting shadow of a ceiling fan. But each time, Liam's hand, Liam's voice, Liam's calm presence dissolved the panic like snow in spring sunlight. And Ethan knew, without a doubt, that the 2 souls were stitching each other back together, piece by fragile piece. Torrin wasn't just learning to trust, he was learning to belong. Night settled over Northwood Ridge in the quiet, crushing way winter often did. Slow, heavy, and absolute. A curtain of snow drifted down from a starless sky, coating rooftops, swallowing fences, and muffling every sound except the moan of wind pushing through the tall pines. The temperature had dropped sharply, and the cold pressed against the windows with a steady, merciless insistence. Inside the coal house, the fireplace glowed a deep amber, brushing the room with warmth. Liam sat cross-legged on the rug, his fingers tracing Torrin's thick fur. The scarred shepherd lay stretched beside him, eyelids drooping, tail tapping lazily against the floor. He looked peaceful, more peaceful than Ethan had ever seen him, his massive chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. For a moment, the world felt safe. Then the explosion came. It wasn't a bomb, just the backfiring of a passing delivery truck, but the sound ripped through the night like a gunshot. A violent crack, sharp enough to shatter the fragile calm. Torrin shot upright instantly, his pupils contracted into tiny burning embers. His legs scrambled beneath him. His entire body recoiled as though swallowed by a memory too dark, too loud, too suffocating to escape. Ethan jumped from the couch. "Torrin, easy, easy." But the dog didn't hear. Couldn't hear. In Torrin's mind, the desert roared awake, the sand, the fire, the scream of metal twisting under pressure. His muscles seized, his breath turned brittle and shallow, and then he bolted. Before Ethan could reach him, Torrin crashed through the dog door in the mudroom, hit the frozen yard, and disappeared into the blizzard. A gray phantom swallowed whole by white. "Torrin!" Ethan shouted, voice cracking, running toward the back door. The wind answered him with a howl. Behind him, Liam stood trembling, his cane forgotten on the floor. "Dad, Dad, he's scared. He's alone in the dark." His voice broke. "Torrin needs us." Ethan grabbed 2 flashlights and the thick parka hanging by the door. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his voice steady for Liam's sake. "We'll find him. Come on." He crouched in front of his son, slipping the small emergency beacon bracelet around Liam's wrist. Ethan had drilled its use into Liam hundreds of times. Press the center button twice if you fall or get separated. But tonight, the device felt painfully inadequate against the vast woods waiting outside. Liam's face, pale, soft, framed by dark brown curls dusted with fear, tilted toward the open doorway. "He thinks the dark is a monster," Liam whispered. "I have to show him it isn't." Ethan swallowed the ache tightening his throat. He lifted Liam onto his shoulders like he did when Liam was little, and stepped out into the storm. The forest beyond their backyard stretched for miles, a tangled world of pine, cedar, and crooked trails disappearing into mountain shadows. Tonight it was a labyrinth carved by wind and ice. Snow pelted their faces, thick and relentless. Visibility shrank to mere feet. Cold chewed through Ethan's gloves. Still, he pressed on. "Torrin," he called into the storm. "Buddy, come back." But the wind shredded the words, dragging them away into emptiness. Liam clung to Ethan's shoulders, his fingers knotted in the fabric of his father's coat. Each breath he exhaled steamed into the air. "Dad." "Do you think he ran because of the sound?" "Yeah," Ethan answered quietly. "He thought he was back there again." Liam nodded, wiping snow from his lashes. "Then we're not leaving him there alone." They searched for nearly 20 minutes before Ethan spotted the first tracks, deep paw prints punched into fresh snow. Torrin's. They followed the trail deeper into the woods, weaving through skeletal trees and fallen branches weighed down by ice. As they walked, Ethan's mind tugged backward, to teammates he'd lost, to the echo of explosions in deserts he couldn't forget, to the same panic he recognized in Torrin's eyes. "You okay, Dad?" Liam asked suddenly, sensing the tightness in Ethan's breathing. "Yeah," Ethan answered, but his voice was too thin. Liam rested his cheek against his father's back. "Torrin's scared like you get scared," he murmured. "We can fix it, if we find him." A moment later, Ethan heard it. A faint sound carried on the wind, half whine, half yelp, buried under the snow's whisper. There. Ethan hurried in the direction of the noise, feet sinking with each step. The flashes from the flashlight bounced off icicles hanging from the pines. Then he saw it, a strange metallic glint in the snow. As he moved closer, his stomach dropped. A rusted steel trap lay partially buried beneath a collapsed branch. Torrin was inside it. The shepherd's leg was caught between the cruel, jagged jaws of the old hunting trap. His fur was speckled with frost. His breath came in broken wisps. His body trembled violently, not just from the cold, but from pain and terror. Liam slid from Ethan's shoulders the moment they reached the clearing, landing on his knees beside Torin. His small hands reached instinctively for the dog's neck. Torin. Torin, it's us. You're not alone. Torin's golden eyes snapped open. Recognition flickered amidst the agony, like a dying flame gasping back to life. He whimpered, a sound of raw relief. Ethan dropped to the snow, hands already pulling at the trap. The steel was old but stubborn. Fingers numb, he wrestled with frozen bolts and rusted hinges. The metal bit into his palms, slicing skin, releasing thin streaks of blood across the white snow. He grit his teeth and pushed harder. "Hang on, buddy," he muttered. "I've got you." Liam leaned closer, wrapping his arms around Torin's head, burying his face in the shepherd's neck. "It's okay. We found you. We're here." Torin pressed his forehead into Liam's chest as though anchoring himself to the boy's heartbeat. Finally, with a metallic shriek, the trap gave way. Torin yelped, instinctively jerking back, then collapsed into the snow, leg free but trembling. Ethan quickly checked the limb. Badly bruised, swelling, cut, but not broken. Thank God. Liam slid both arms around the dog's neck again, whispering into his fur. "No one leaves you. Not ever again." Torin's shivering slowed. He eased his massive body against Liam's small frame, curling as close as he could, as if the boy's presence warmed him better than any fire. Ethan stared at them, his wounded son and this equally wounded animal, and felt something strike deep inside him, something old and aching and long-held. Not fear, not guilt, something like recognition. "Come on," Ethan said gently. "Let's take him home." He wrapped his arms beneath Torin, lifting the heavy shepherd against his chest. Liam held onto Torin's fur with one hand and Ethan's jacket with the other as they trudged back toward the path. Snow filled their footprints behind them, but it no longer felt like the night was swallowing them. Because Torin was no longer lost. By the time they reached the back door, Torin was no longer shaking. His head rested against Liam's shoulder, eyes half closed, breath steady. When Ethan set him down inside the warm kitchen, Torin immediately pressed his full weight against Liam's legs, leaning, trusting, returning. A soldier finally finding his way home. The morning of the evaluation arrived with a sky the color of steel. Muted, heavy, and cold enough that Ethan felt the chill through his coat even before he stepped outside. Thin mist clung to the street, drifting low over the asphalt like a ghost reluctant to leave. Liam stood beside him on the porch, one hand resting on Torin's broad shoulder. The shepherd's injured leg had healed enough for him to walk normally, though a faint limp still lingered, visible only in moments of haste or uncertainty. Yet this morning, it wasn't the limp that troubled Torin. It was the tension coiled beneath his scars. His ears twitched at every distant noise, and his golden eyes darted with the anticipation of something he could not yet name, as though he sensed the trial waiting for him. Ethan knelt in front of him, sliding a palm gently over Torin's jaw. "It's just a checkup," he murmured. "We're going with you. You're not alone." Torin pressed his forehead into Ethan's hand briefly, then turned toward Liam, nudging the boy's fingers with a soft grunt. Liam smiled. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice as warm and quiet as a candle in a dark room. "I'll be right next to you." And with that promise, the three of them climbed into the truck and began the drive toward the center. The Northwood Ridge K-9 Training Center sat at the edge of a frozen meadow, its wooden siding dusted with frost, its windows glowing faintly with morning light. Inside, the halls smelled of disinfectant, cedarwood polish, and the faint musk of dogs who had passed through over the years. As they approached the evaluation room, Ethan noticed a change in Torin's posture. His steps slowed, his tail lowered, his ribs expanded with each shaky breath like he was preparing for impact, waiting for pain, waiting for memory. The evaluation officer today was Sergeant Damon Kells, a middle-aged man built like a boulder in uniform. He had a square jaw covered in a salt and pepper beard, thick brows that framed deep-set blue eyes, and a faded scar running down his left forearm, an injury from a training explosion years before. He carried himself with the disciplined stiffness of a man who'd lost more than he spoke about. Kells had a reputation: strict, unemotional, fair to a fault. "Cole," he greeted Ethan with a curt nod, then he studied Torin. "Dog looks steadier than before, but this isn't about looking steady. It's about proving he won't snap." He turned to Liam with a softened expression. "And you must be the boy everyone's talking about." Liam smiled shyly. "Torin's my friend." Kells nodded once, the stern lines of his face easing. "We'll see if he thinks the same when the test starts." Inside the evaluation chamber, the lights were bright and unforgiving. The walls were padded with gray acoustic foam, and in the center of the room stood a metal table with a control panel built into it. Kells stepped behind the panel. "We'll start with low-level auditory triggers and see how he responds." Ethan positioned himself near the wall while Liam sat on a padded bench. Torin stayed close to Liam, their bodies leaning toward each other with unspoken trust. Kells flipped the first switch. A soft pop echoed from the speakers, similar to a distant firecracker. Torin stiffened immediately, his muscles seizing beneath his skin. His ears shot upward, then flattened hard against his skull. A tremor ran down his spine. His breath grew rapid. His pupils shrank until they were almost black. The second sound was louder, a sharp metallic crack reminiscent of gunfire. Torin stumbled backward, claws scraping the padded floor. His chest heaved as though the air around him had suddenly thinned. The third sound was the worst. An explosive thud, deep, resonant, and terrifyingly close to the real thing. Torin's entire body convulsed. His legs buckled. His eyes went wild with the kind of terror that came from memory, not reality. His voice broke in a guttural cry, half bark, half plea, raw and primal. Ethan pushed off the wall, instinctively moving toward him. But Liam was faster. The boy stood, his cane clattering softly to the floor. He walked straight toward the sound of Torin's panic, guided not by sight but by the dog's trembling breaths. "Torin," Liam whispered, "I'm here." Torin jerked once more at another soft crackle from the speakers, but the moment Liam's hand pressed against his chest, something inside the shepherd shifted. His breath hitched, then slowed. His claws stopped skidding against the floor. Liam leaned closer, his forehead touching the dog's. "It's okay," he murmured. "There's no explosion. It's just noise. Darkness can't hurt you. I live in it every day." Torin's shaking grew weaker. He closed his eyes. Liam's small fingers splayed over the dog's fur, grounding him in the present. "You're home," Liam whispered again. And then, a miracle Ethan had never dared to imagine, Torin exhaled. Not in panic, but in surrender. A slow, heavy release of breath, as though pushing every memory of fire and pain out of his lungs. He lowered himself onto the floor at Liam's feet, not collapsing, but choosing to rest, choosing to trust. His body softened, his tail brushed Liam's ankle, his head dropped into the boy's lap, no longer trembling. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the heater. Sergeant Kells stared, mouth slightly open, his stern face cracked with disbelief. "I've never—" He cleared his throat, trying to regain professionalism. "I've never seen a dog stop mid-episode like that without sedation." Ethan swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "He trusts him," he said softly. "He trusts Liam more than he trusts himself." Kells nodded slowly, the realization sinking into him like a weight. "That boy, he's the only thing pulling that dog back from hell." After a long moment, Kells turned toward his clipboard, tore off a sheet, signed it with a thick stroke of ink, and pressed it into Ethan's hand. "Torin stays. Permanently." Liam's mouth parted in a soft gasp. Torin lifted his head as though sensing the shift in the air. Ethan knelt beside them both and whispered, "You're home for good, buddy." From that day forward, Torin became more than a companion. He became Liam's second sight, his shield, his shadow. He walked Liam to school every morning, guiding him around cracks in the sidewalk and patches of ice. He glared down bullies before they could speak a single cruel word. He positioned himself at the top of the staircase each time Liam descended, blocking any possible misstep. At night, he lay beside the boy's bed, his massive body curled like a warm wall between the world and the child he protected. Sometimes, when Liam whispered, "Go with me," Torin responded with a slow, solemn nod, as though promising he would follow the boy into any darkness. One evening, as the sun died into a faint line of red behind the pines, Liam lay on the porch beside Torin, his fingers scratching gently behind the shepherd's torn ear. "Dad?" Liam called softly. Ethan turned from the doorway. "Yeah, buddy." "I don't see the sun," Liam said, "but when I hold Torin, I feel warm. Warm like light." Torin lifted his head and placed it on the boy's leg, golden eyes softening into something peaceful. Ethan watched them, his son and this broken dog whose heart had begun to heal, and felt something settle in his chest, something that had been missing for years. "Yeah," he whispered, "that's what light feels like." As the last of the daylight faded, the three of them stayed on the porch, three souls once lost in different darknesses, now wrapped in a warmth none of them could have found alone. In the quiet bond between a broken soldier, a blind child, and a wounded dog, we are reminded that miracles rarely arrive with thunder or blazing light. More often, they come softly through the beings God places in our paths, guiding us back to hope when we no longer know the way. In our daily lives, we rush past small blessings, forgetting that every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, is a whisper from heaven, telling us we are not alone. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love still heals, that redemption is real, and that God works through the gentle and the humble. Leave a comment, subscribe, and help us spread light to more souls. May the Lord bless you and your family, and may every wounded heart find its way home.